Good morning, everyone. I'm going to brief you about a wild night last night in Poinciana, a normally very quiet community. It was anything but that, starting at about 7:23 last night. Now, the information I give you is all preliminary. It's certainly subject to change. We anticipate a lot of the details will change along the way, because the stories we're giving you are the initial information we received, and we can't verify all of its validity at this early hour. But this person here is Rudy Arenas. Rudy Arenas is also known as Shorty. Sometime around 7:20 last night, Rudy called our victim, Orlando Rivera, and said, "Hey, I've got something to show you." So they met in front of 527 Finch Lane in Poinciana in the roadway. And at that time, Rudy pulled out a wad of cash and started counting it. Orlando says, "Hey, I got food in the car for the kids. I don't have time for this." To which Rudy said, "You don't have time to watch me count my money?" And he immediately pulled a gun and started shooting. He shot Orlando 4 times. Orlando's deceased. One of those gunshots was to the head. He shot Brenda, who is Orlando's wife, 7 times. She is currently in a local hospital in stable condition. Brenda calls, among others, 911 and says, "Shorty shot us." Shorty is a nickname for Rudy Arenas, who's 40 years of age. Of course, our deputies arrived within just a couple of minutes. We pulled Orlando from his 2020 Nissan and tried life-saving efforts until the arrival of EMS, to no avail. Immediately, we started looking for our shooter, who was Rudy Arenas. Rudy had fled the scene in his daughter's vehicle. He called his daughter, and they met. The daughter also called the Osceola Sheriff's Office. Now, in this particular area, if you're not familiar with Central Florida, literally one side of the street is Osceola County, the other side of the street is Polk County. So the daughter of the shooter says, "Hey, I've got the person that you need, that you want to see." We were notified by the Osceola Sheriff's Office. We did a felony stop in front of this house over my right shoulder. When we did that, Rudy ran into the house. It is the house of a relative. When Rudy ran into the house, our deputies tried to take him into custody. He locked himself in the bathroom. We immediately called our SWAT team. Now it's about 10:25, 10:30 at night. The SWAT team arrives and we began to negotiate. Rudy is talking out of his head. He says he's on drugs, and he talks about fentanyl, and others have told us he was on a binge. By the way, this is that low-level, nonviolent drug that the Florida Senate thinks we don't put people in jail long enough for, or they think we put them in jail too long, and they want to reduce the sentence for that. Yeah, this is all started about low-level, nonviolent drugs, quote-unquote, that the Florida Senate thinks we lock too many people up for. Wait till you hear the rest of this story. So we negotiate throughout the night with Rudy. He points the gun to his head. He talks about killing himself. He points the gun and tells us, "If you come in here, I'm going to kill you." He allegedly tells his daughter he's going to shoot himself, even before we come into the picture with the SWAT team. Our negotiators negotiate with him. He said, well, if you give me a cigarette, I'll come out. So we have the robot deliver him a cigarette. He doesn't come out. So we talk to him some more. He comes into the hallway like he's going to come out of the residence, and he doesn't have a gun in his hand at that time. So we position ourselves to take him into custody. We now have a warrant for him for first-degree murder and attempted murder, and he runs back into the bathroom again. Then he comes back out of the bathroom with the gun in his pocket and his hand in his pocket. Our SWAT team members shoot him several times, maybe as many as 3, with bean bags. The bean bags knock him down. As he goes down, he drops the gun. Then we see he is in the living room, or in a room at this time. We're on the outside of the house, so we can't get to him. He immediately goes down, he picks the gun up, and he points it at the SWAT team. That was his last bad choice. When he picks the gun up and he's coming up in order to point it at the SWAT team, 3 of our SWAT team members shot him. A lot. And he's deceased. Let me tell you a little bit about this fella. You'll find it interesting. In the state of Florida, we have a very forgiving criminal justice system. We know that. Less than 4 of every 100 people that interact with us ever go to prison. But listen to Rudy. He has 16 out-of-state felony and misdemeanor charges, mostly in Rhode Island. They are things like drugs, more drugs, and he has 2 Florida arrests. He's got a total of 18 arrests. This guy's got a total of 18 arrests. Cocaine, cannabis, delivery of drugs, domestic violence cases. Rudy has been out of control. In addition to that, our victim, Orlando Rivera, in 2010, was arrested for robbery with a firearm, murder, and a litany of other criminal charges. He pled guilty. Our victim pled guilty and received 5.8 years in the Florida prison system. Now, you're going to have to talk to the Orange County prosecutors about what kind of negotiated plea this was, because the murder charge was ultimately null prost. He pled to robbery with a firearm or other dangerous weapon. He pled to burglaries, assaults, drugs, contrabands, you know, those things the Florida Senate want to call low-level nonviolent crimes. And he only got 5.8 years for what sounds like, at least on its face, life felonies. Our victim's been to the state prison at that one time for 5.8 years, despite a lot of arrest. But I suggest to you, had our forgiving criminal justice system in Rhode Island and Florida not been as forgiving as it already is, these guys had been in prison where it appears they should have been. They would have both been alive today. And they're both dead. So at the end of the day, this is a peaceful, quiet, wonderful Poinciana community that erupted in violence last night by these quote-unquote low-level, nonviolent criminal offenders. Are there any other questions?
You said initially that when these 2 gentlemen had met in the street, that the suspect had stated that his kids were in the car.
No, that he was taking food home to his kids.
Just he and his...
Just he and his wife.
Okay. Was there anybody at this home when he went inside?
There was 2 other people. They fled from the residence, so he was in there by himself.
Sheriff, how did Rudy and Orlando know each other?
I don't know how they knew each other at this early stage of the investigations.
Was there an argument that took place?
Have no idea. But he agreed to meet with him initially, so he didn't suspect violence. And of course, being a convicted felon, he shouldn't have had a firearm. But he did. Do you know how he got this handgun? This .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun? He stole it earlier in the day from an acquaintance of his because he met him and said, "Hey, I'm going to trade you my car for your gun." Well, wrong. He committed one of those low-level nonviolent crimes. He stole his acquaintance's firearm and did not swap the car for it at all. So this all started earlier in the day. The initial information is he's been on a binger for about 3 days. He's been up around the clock because he's using these quote-unquote low-level nonviolent drugs. If y'all can't tell I'm a little beefed about this, I am. Anyone who thinks your 85% sentence should go down to 65% is just out of their mind. This is already a very forgiving criminal justice system, but we have 2 dead people this morning. And it was a horrible event, and it was started by Rudy.
Did Brenda say why they were meeting up last night?
Rudy told Orlando on the phone, "I've got something I want to show you." They were, at least according to her statements, on the way back with food. So he stops. They meet up. All of a sudden, Rudy pulls out a wad of cash and starts counting it. And Orlando says, "Look, I got food for the kids. I got to go." And at that point, Rudy looks at Orlando and says, "You don't have time for me to count my money?" And he says, "No." And he pulls the gun and starts shooting into the car, where he shot and killed Orlando and shot Orlando's wife, Brenda, 7 times, or at least we see 7 entrances at this early stage of the investigation. Totally bizarre, and that's why we have investigations. We will dot the I's, cross the T's. We'll go backward and talk to friends and family and any other witnesses we can find along the way. This is preliminary information, but once again, it is a clear and convincing example of what happens when people get out of control and start shooting people with a firearm. And oh, by the way, did you know that our victim, Orlando, also had a dangerous drug warrant out of Philadelphia? But it was an in-state pickup only. Like, you know, hey, we got a warrant for you, so if you'll just leave Philadelphia, then you'll be safe. So he's in Florida. Well, he's got an active felony warrant in Philadelphia. That's all right, Pennsylvania. You can clear out your warrant now.
And as far as those SWAT team members who were involved, you said that there were 3 of them who fired shots.
Yes.
I presume that they are on paid leave.
Paid administrative leave during the investigation. We have a normal protocol anytime we use such deadly force. There's 4 separate investigations. We conduct an investigation a death investigation by our homicide team. We had an administrative investigation that's totally separate and apart that investigates for compliance with policies and rules and regulations. The state attorney called to the scene does an independent investigation, and we turn all of our investigations over to them. And of course, the medical examiner does the 4th investigation. So there's a very strict protocol as to the number of investigations.
How many years have those members been on the SWAT team?
I don't know this early in the investigation, but this SWAT team is very, very experienced.
Something we can see from here. Can you tell us what happened with the glass window?
That's where we broke the window out in order to put gas in and encourage him to come out.
With tear gas?
Yes.
And that home that they initially met at on Finch Lane, was that Orlando's home?
That was just in the street. We don't know whose house that was. That just happened to be where the shooting ultimately took place. We don't know why they met in the street there yet, other than that address had nothing to do with it. Okay? Thank y'all very much. Appreciate you being out this morning. We will give you further details as we uncover them, okay?
Thank you.
See y'all later. Bye-bye.